Amen. Thank you. Good morning. How are you guys this morning? Everybody okay? Good. I'm going to tell you a story this morning that isn't exactly my story. It actually belongs to my husband. I was there, but it really happened with my husband, and we're going to see if I can do it justice and tell it right. But this happened a few years ago, probably like 6 or 7, when we lived in Tennessee. We lived just north of Nashville, and I worked at a school called Highland Academy. And there was a situation that happened, and they asked my husband to be dean too. So he was dean in the boys' dorm, and I was dean in the girls' dorm. And if you adults are wondering how that happened, we don't know. It was crazy. But God helped us get through it, and we actually had a lot of fun. But being a boys' dean is very different than being a girls' dean. Boys like to get in a lot of mischief. Girls do too. But boys really like to get in a lot of mischief, and if you're a boys' dean, you know that you've got to keep the boys out of mischief. That's your full-time job. And one weekend, it was probably, I think, a Saturday night, and that's when boys like to get in the most mischief, is when they have some downtime. My husband was out in the dorm, and one of the ways that they used to tell us apart was I was Dean Powell, and he was Mr. Dean. And so they said, Mr. Dean, there's something in the basement. And Andy looked, and they had been in an awful lot of mischief that night, and he didn't really feel like he believed them, because he thought that they were going to try to trick him and get him down in the basement and wrestle with him, because they like to wrestle with him. And he's like, I don't believe you. But he started to notice that the boys were getting together some weapons and some sticks, and they said, seriously, Mr. Dean, there is something in the basement, and we think it's a skunk. Now, if you found a skunk in your house, what do you think your parents would do? Anybody know? You don't want to know. You don't. Do you think they might scream? Why would they scream? What's wrong with skunks? They're awful cute. You would get away from it? You can get sprayed. Does it smell good when you get sprayed? No, it smells bad for days and days and days. And so you think Mr. Dean was a little worried? He was. He still wasn't sure if he believed them, but he said, you guys go first, and I'm going to follow you down, and you show me where the skunk is. Well, he didn't have to go far before he saw a little black and white animal scurry across the hall. And he knew they were right. There was a skunk in the dorm. So he had some decisions to make, and the decision he made first was the boys should not be anywhere near the skunk, obviously, with their sticks, because that could go bad. And they were saying, Dean Powell, you just got to go kill that skunk. You got to go kill him. He's going to spray the dorm. You got to go kill him. Well, Mr. Powell said, you all go behind the door. I'm going to lock it, and don't you dare come through this door. So he locked them on the other side of the door, and he crept down the hallway. And he looked in one room, and he wasn't there. And he looked in the next room, and he saw black and white scurry down behind a dresser. And he saw the skunk go up in behind the dresser, and he thought, what am I going to do? Well, he's got to somehow get to the skunk. So Mr. Powell, and have you seen my husband? He's not a little guy. Climbed all the way on top of the dresser, and he perched up there like a bird. And then he leaned over, and he started to pull out the dresser drawers one by one, hoping that if he did it slowly enough, the skunk didn't come out and do what? Spray him. Oh, he was being so careful. He got down to the second to the last one, and the skunk wasn't there. And he finally pulled out the last one, and there it was. Then he started thinking, I've got to get this skunk out. How could this skunk have gotten in this building? And he thought, and he remembered that a few nights ago, probably about 4 nights previous, he had been shutting down the dorm when he noticed that one of the outside doors had been left open. And he knew it had been left open for quite a while, and he thought that must be the night the skunk got in. So this skunk has been in here for probably 4 days, and he's not had any food and water. I bet this skunk is hungry. So he decided he needed to call in some reinforcements. Do you think he went and got the boys? No, they weren't any help. Who do you think he called? Me. He called me. That was a funny phone call to get. Stephanie, you got to come bring bread. There's a skunk in the dorm. I screamed a little bit, I have to be honest. I was really nervous. How are we going to get a skunk out of the dorm? So I grabbed the nearest thing next to me, hot dog buns, and I ran over to the boys' dorm. And I met him there, and sure enough, there was a skunk in the dorm. So I gave him the bread, and he says, you clear out. If this thing goes off, it should only be me, not you two. I was like, hey, I don't disagree with that. So I ran away and left him with the bread. So he started pulling the bread out, and he started throwing it on the floor to try to get the skunk to notice the bread and eat the bread, and then maybe he could lead it out of the room and out of the dorm. Well, there's something that Mr. Powell knew about skunks. They don't see very well. So when he was throwing the bread, the skunk didn't see it, and he thought, I'm going to have to throw it closer. Now, because Mr. Powell is an engineer and he thinks this way, he decided he was going to ball up the bread better so that he knew that it would fly better. You know, he thinks like this. And he got really close, and he went and he threw it, and it landed right on top of the skunk's head. And the skunk's tail went up, and Andy went, and he just waited. And then the skunk sniffed, and he smelled the bread, and he started munching, and his tail went down. Oh, he'd made it. But he wasn't going to do that again. He had to be really careful this next time how he threw the bread, so he balled it up even better to make sure he knew it was going to fly right. And he threw it just in front, and he got the skunk to move one step closer to where he wanted to go. And that's what he started doing. He just threw the bread, and the skunk would move one step closer, and they started to move out of the room and down to the hall. Now, Mr. Powell was having to pay very close attention to the bread that he was balling up and making sure it was thrown just right, but he forgot about the skunk, believe it or not. When all of a sudden he turned, and guess where the skunk was? It was right by his leg. And all of the skunk realized that he was right by somebody's leg, and the skunk went, and Mr. Powell went, and they both just stood and stared at each other. Is he going to go off? But then the skunk smelled more bread, and he thought, this guy's doing some good stuff, so I'm going to be okay. And they both went, and Mr. Powell kept throwing him bread all the way out the door. Now, where do you think I was? I was way out the door and way past the door waiting for the skunk. I could see the door when all of a sudden I see a little black nose come out of the door. And I thought, oh, it's going to happen. And all of a sudden, the skunk came out of the door, and he trotted around, and then he took off and ran across the grass, and then behind him came Mr. Powell, and Mr. Powell walked out of the door and went, and I went, because we'd gotten the skunk out of the dorm without it spraying, and it was pretty exciting. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was your age, and even still now, there are some people in my life that are a lot like that skunk. They're kind of mean, and they're scary. Sometimes you meet them on the playground or in school or when you're over playing at a friend's house. And when something is mean and scary, we often want to be mean and scary back because it feels better. Just like those boys that thought they should maybe kill the skunk and get rid of him, right? But the Bible tells us to do something different when we come across mean and scary people. What does the Bible tell us to do when we meet somebody who's mean? Does anybody know? Be nice. That's right. Just like Mr. Powell was, he was nice to that skunk. And the skunk knew he was being nice, and he got food, and he got out of the dorm so he could be happy and live a good life. And the skunk was smiling, and Mr. Powell was smiling, and the boys were smiling. If he hadn't been nice, that skunk might have gone off, and the whole dorm would smell, and then nobody would be smiling. So just remember, next time you come around somebody who might be mean like a skunk, being nice might be the best thing to do. You can go back to your seats.